bit deeper on the education tip, because
And I think that those feelings are really what is so important to consider, because I think it's so interesting what you're talking about. It's all these different factors that are contributing to it. Has to be a feeling amongst this population. You're talking about dismissal of their feelings, mass dismissal of their feelings by the media, politicians, the communities within which they live. And then you're also talking about the burden. Society puts the burden on them to be the ones that fix the problem. You have to start acting differently, and you have to start behaving.
Your
Well, you have to start. Yeah, you have to start behaving better if you don't want to be killed. And they're also, so they're being, they're being burdened, they're being dismissed, which has to, I mean, you're saying creates this paralysis in them. And then they're also being subjected to unequal conditions. And so I think that's what's so interesting, is like to imagine what that must feel like. And that's, what I was thinking about earlier, just, all of you, I mean, you were talking about your own experience, kind of seeing sentiments of racism kind of come out of the woodwork. You all, I think, both work with children who are being subjected to these messages. And so what I'm really interested in is, there's this dismissal from the outside world that says your problems aren't real, and even if they are real, they're your fault and you need to fix them. And I'm interested to hear what you think are the effects of that. Are black communities and brown communities buying into that? Are black boys growing up feeling powerless, like they're the problem, or they are the ones, you know what I mean? Like, I just wonder about the lingering effects of that, and what purpose it serves to further oppress.
So internalized white supremacy is real. It's, I mentioned that I grew up in a relatively sheltered life. And I definitely bought into, white supremacy and its messaging. In the school I went to, I took the high school I'm talking about, took, AP classes, and I was mostly the only black person in those classes. And the messaging kind of that white supremacy sends you is that, you're different than the rest of those people over there. And you start buying into that. And you start believing that if they acted more like me, then they wouldn't get, targeted. Because I'm not getting targeted. I didn't think I was getting targeted.
You start to feel like you have to act white.
Yeah.
I have to talk a certain way. I have to walk a certain way. I need to look a certain way. I have to dummy down my culture in order to be accepted in this society. And even still, when you come to the table and you have a white person and a black person going for a job, 9 out of 10, they're still going to, it doesn't matter if you walk and talk like a duck, which is the duck they told you to act like, because of your skin color, they're still going to shoot you down,
It's also when you do all the things you mentioned, like doing all the things. So this whole, our education system is meritocratic, right? So it's really individualistic. Like, you need to do what you need to do well, the whole notion of American dream, and then you'll succeed in life, right? And even still doing that, right, you not only have those challenges in the real world, right? But then when you do make it a place, I think of going to Cornell University, an Ivy League institution, and even making it, and finally getting accepted to a college, going there, a couple years in, there's a big article that almost all the students of color are there because of affirmative action.
Yeah, right.
So it's like you still can't justify your place, because there must be a reason why you're here. Like, obviously, you couldn't have done it on your own. So even though you buy into this whole notion, this meritocratic way of like, I'll work hard, and look, there goes the fruits of my hard work, right? If you want to buy into that, here I am at Cornell University. But now I'm at Cornell University, and I'm told that only because of a policy am I here. It's not because of the hard work I put in. So it's just, again, it becomes this almost endless way of just trying to oppress the oppressive nature of the society in a way. So no matter what you're doing, and you're for those that try to say, okay, I'm going to live by the standards that are put in front of me, the blueprint to succeed in this world. Even by doing that, you find down the road, there's still going to be, a challenge. There's going to be another obstacle that's going to challenge you from that. So
if you're black, coming from the black community, and you go get some education and go see the world, now you're a sellout, or you're Uncle Tom. So that takes us back to more issues in our own community, where not only are we fighting the racial disparities that's going on and the police brutality, but now we're fighting ourselves as well, and it's just a big ball of combustion in the black community. And
so do you think that people are, you spoke whenever you were telling your personal experience about the incidents that happened whenever you were 18, you talked about the power of the pen and how important it is to have the knowledge necessary to protect yourself whenever you're in those sort of situations, to know your rights and that sort of thing. And now you're talking about issues within the black community, and I'm wondering, is there an issue where members of the black community and brown communities are not as aware of the issues that are afflicting them and what has to be done, or do they know, and are they united and they're just still not being heard? Is there work that has to be done there as well, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, the miseducation of the Negro, if we go back even there, where it's like, you don't have to, if there's not a back door in the house, the mentality of the black, and I don't know, but this is what my research and my reading has brought me to conclude, that they'll still go, oh, massa, I'll build a back door for you, even though it's not a back door. I need to go to the back. It's something inside, and it has festered for many, many years, that makes some black people feel just inferior. Like they just can't. And I don't know if I used the right word or not, inferior, superior, inferior. But within the community, within ourselves, we don't feel that we can be the sun and the stars and the moon because of the way we've been treated, and our ancestors have been treated for generations after generations. And when you try to bust out of that shell, like that's where the sellout or the Uncle Tom come in, or someone's gonna bust you upside your head and say, who do you think you are? What gives you the gall to think that you can succeed? You're gonna shoot you right on back down where you belong. So the uplifting in the black community, it needs to start within, and then the pen and the protesting and everything. We need to go from there. But I definitely feel like it's some intrinsic, internal values that we must, as a community, as a people, as a black people, overcome, as Martin would say,
Yeah, I keep going back to this holistic notion. I think, so for example, if you're a young child growing up, let's say young me, Puerto Rican projects in New York City, and I'm growing up now, if I look on TV and I see, let's say, a Black Lives Matters movement, right? But behind that are so much negative connotations to it now, right? So then I see this movement that is being put together to challenge some of the injustices out there, but the way the media portrays it, or the way it's being portrayed, is as a negative thing, right? So then I'm saying, oh well, here's this people are upset, and they look like me and they're upset and they're fighting back, but everyone's saying it's the wrong thing to do, right? And so if there's not that counterbalance just to counter that rhetoric, then I can go forth just thinking there's a negative connotation associated to a movement, right? A movement that is trying to challenge oppression. And then if I'm not gaining any intellectual understanding of the issues, right, or my own history, if the schools are not teaching me, there's a lot of places, Arizona and others, that are trying to wipe out ethnic studies programs, right? So if I can't even learn about my own history, or where I've come from, or who, what's happened in the past, what movements happened in the past, or what's been going on in the past to challenge these, or even, even the harsh realities are taken away from history, in a way. I know I'm going into your realm, Joshua, but the harsh realities, like people try to whitewash or clean up, quote unquote, history, and I want to talk about the atrocities that have happened, right? So if I'm not having this knowledge, right, and then what I'm seeing, I'm socialized to think negative things about the challenges to the status quo or oppressive ways, it's easy just to live in a negative shell of like hopelessness, right? Of, well, how do I say? And then so there is the only alternative in your mind then becomes, well, I guess I have to quote unquote sell out, or I have to be this way in order to make it. So I think there has to be the sense of, within communities and within schools themselves too, of this holistic understanding of the issues that are at hand, a social historical understanding of it, really understanding from a larger trajectory, not just in a vacuum, not just today, but what does this mean in the larger historical aspect, social historical aspects of our society, of our community, etc. And really, I'm also a believer of knowledge is power in a sense, right? And really having that knowledge then to use it, and how do I use it in a way that can challenge what's going on, or that could help inform others, right? So that we can have these conversations, and then with that conversation, do something about it.
Molly, back on your question, do Black people, do they have the knowledge? Do they know? Are they aware of what it takes or what needs to happen, right? So let's go back to the KKK, when they wanted to instill fear. The whole thing, these burning of the crosses, killing and hanging, was to make sure that you are so scared that you will not try to come out of your shell and think you know a little bit of something because you read a book or something, right? Well, they're not burning crosses. Well, no, they're still burning places.
They are.
But they're doing it a different way now as well, and I just got this idea because you was just saying these challenges and how we're going to overcome them. But that fear is, okay, well, if you stand up for your rights and go protest, are you going to lose your job? Your employer is going to say, oh, I saw you in Missouri protesting with the rest of the crew. I don't want you in my establishment. So then there's a fear. When minorities are constantly working for pennies and worrying about bills and how they're going to eat, and then you have someone saying, well, if you step out of this little cycle that we have you in, we're going to take what little that you do have away. So that is another form of that fear that has been implemented, I think. It's just a different way that they are putting fear in our communities. And so it's not that people don't know to pick up the pen and write legislation or write a judge or defend themselves in the courtroom. I've done that. I don't need an attorney. I don't need to give you the money that I don't have to defend myself for something that I did not do, when all I need to do is actually get up here and speak and address the court, But then I've been in a situation where I've done that too. I went in there representing myself pro se, walked up out of there with, and everyone in the courtroom. The courtroom was full of people, and they walked out. Everybody was looking at me like, "Who is she?" I'm just like you. I'm just like you. But you're sitting here, you're copping out to these pleas. You're going to be on probation. You know you're going to get in trouble again within the next 2 years. You got to pay this money. You're probably using drugs. All of these different areas that they're saying you can't do this, you can't do that. Sign your name here. You're not going to be able to get a job. I mean, it's just a cycle. But if someone could just step up and say, I don't care. I'm one who. And I may be one of many who say, I'll jump off the cliff and build my airplane on the way down. There's a lot of people that's scared that doesn't have that. But I think that comes from building a foundation when we're younger, which is why we have organizations that I started, or Black Lives Matter, so we can pump some I want to say some gas,
And again, we're not talking about some of the structural aspects. We're maybe talking about the legal aspects, or when there were laws and things of that sort. It's again a relatively small time. So when you mentioned, Joshua, like this whole notion of you want to look at the inequalities and stuff like that, it's like we just had a small time where we had a chance to start coming out of those spaces in a sense, and so right. What are the expectations in that sense? And just quickly with Black Lives Matter, I think, as mentioned before, I think again, the notion of socialization. When you see you're socialized, I think it is just the protest, right? And then how the negative connotations to that. But what's not right, like you said, it's not seeing like the local work that's being done, the holistic way of teaching and teaching history and teaching stuff that's not ever mentioned. It's almost like you can do a poll of people like what does Black Lives Matter do, right?
Protest.
And it'll be right, or there'll be, or certain populations of this country will be like causing trouble, right? And so you don't see all the aspects of it as well. I always hear people say, oh well, when Dr. King did it in the civil rights movement, it was different. But I'm just always thinking like that when it first started, it was probably the same thoughts being said, like he's just trying to start trouble.
Definitely.
It's not doing anything. All they do is boycott buses or sit-ins and stuff like that, and not seeing the holistic aspect of what's going on behind the scenes, and that it's a very fluid, multi-dimensional movement in a way. So
I think the media representation of the Black Lives Matter movement in another way is a way of this white supremacy idea being ingrained, because the media representation you see from this movement is always the cars burning and the shops busted in. It's just like you said, it's never everything that's behind it as well. So even with the movement that's supposed to be killing this, supremacy, where white people are still taking it and making it, about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that, Jermaine, what you said about that timeline is really interesting, because I hear a lot as these issues come out and people discuss them in whatever capacity they discuss them. I hear a lot of people saying, like, not only get over it, but a lot of people are saying that people are imagining these issues at all, that it's not real, and that people deserve what happened to them, and it's all individualistic, and you did it. And if you look at, I've seen that timeline, and if you look at that timeline and you look at the amount of time that Black people have been legally free in this community, or in our society, then it is almost unfathomable to argue, like, how is it even imaginable that we have eradicated racism in that short amount of time? I mean, viewpoints don't change that quickly over a generation or two. It just doesn't work.
Well, just even the word reparations, right? So I just think about everything that's happened in Oregon, and they've used the word reparations, like we're trying to gain reparations for land that was ours, that's taken over by the government, type of thing. And like, my goodness, how many times have there's been a movement for reparations for the Black community, and everyone's just like laughing at it, like, oh, you're just touching something that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And here it is, reparations are being used in this white militia way of thinking, and people are just like, well, give them space to talk, or let's hear what they have to say, or they're using their American right to protest. And it's just like, all right, if that's not showing this kind of double standards in our society, I mean, I don't know, it's just insane. Yeah. So
I've been reading MLK lately because I've been doing research for next week, but he has this piece where he talks about, the bootstrap mentality. And he talks about, the Emancipation Proclamation and, freeing enslaved people and not giving them anything once, freedom was supposed to happen. And kind of like, it's the reparation argument. How can you expect the people to, start with literally nothing? And then in many situations get tied back to the land, get tied back to debt.
Or actually, those that were the reparations went to those slave owners.
Right.
They were giving money for their loss, pretty much.
The slave owners got reparations.
Right.
Exactly. So yeah.
Really quickly, because I think, Jermaine, I know you need to go. You've got kiddos waiting on you. We should wrap up soon. All the things we've been talking about have really, I think, solidified that obviously an issue does exist in varied forms for different people. And, based on the different work that you do, we've heard kind of the different ways that we see it manifest itself. And April, you did some talking about this idea that change does at least have to happen, maybe not start, but in Black communities as well. But for our listeners, for people like me, a white woman who's never, I have my own set of, social marginalizations that affect me, but I've never faced this issue in the same way that you all have and other members of my community have. And so I'm interested to hear what you think if change does happen, which I think we all hope it does. If change is to happen, then how do you see it starting? And what can people like us do to help facilitate that process?
I'm I'm a hopeless romantic, I guess, when I think there can be change. So even though I said as this paralysis, but I do feel like at some point people are going to come together. And so I'm very involved in my pedagogy and the way I teach and how I interact with people is something called intergroup dialogue, of bringing people together across difference and to have conversations and critical conversations about the issues that are occurring in our lives, right? Because I do feel that we can talk in isolation from each other, but since we're still a segregated society, if we only know about another person based on what we see on TV or how we're socialized, and we don't have those real conversations, we're never gonna understand where people are coming from, right? So it's almost, for me, it's like I kind of understand, if you've never interacted with a black or brown person in your life, and you grew up in a white suburb, you went to a white high school, the only interactions maybe in college or some of these brief snippets of interaction, and then you're fed a certain message. It's like, part of me is like, I can understand why you think the way you do, right? Because you never had a chance to critically engage in these conversations in a way where you're hearing real stories, or you're trying to, in a personal way, right? So I really am a proponent and a big believer in something called intergroup dialogue, where you come across difference, have these conversations, and then when everyone's perspective is out there and thrown out there, and no matter how harsh it can be at times, you want the real aspect of it, the honesty, to come out, because only through these honest conversations can we understand where people are coming from, why you think the way you do, and then with that we can come together and then try to figure out how do we then solve these things, right? So I'm always, when I teach, I'm always hopeful that I may not see change right away, in a sense of, we're gonna make these laws or name change, etc. But down the road, I may touch someone that may have a position of power down the road, and may look, and when they're hiring people, to say, you know what, we have only one kind of person working here. I need to do something to make change diversify, or I need to do something with this policy. I'm now a big judge. This just doesn't seem right? Because I've heard perspectives from those that have been targeted, or with target identities or marginalized identities, and they share their stories, and it's real to me now. So I think for me, it's really built on knowledge, critical conversations, critical understanding of our society, and coming across difference to hear, and with a personal relationship, not just this, I heard on TV somewhere, or I have this, one black friend, but really try to have these intimate relationships where we can understand why our perspectives are the way they are, and then understand what's going on, and how can we do something about it, really, with that. So
I'm a person in the past who's been Black Power. I would be a Black Panther, revolutionist, but at the same time, so to answer your question, how is this change going to happen? I feel like our community needs to, for one, get together, but then there needs to be a call of action for anyone, green, blue, yellow, purple, who have any inkling of the injustice that's going on. And we need to, whereas opposed, a few years ago, I would say, no, it just need to be the blacks, and we need to unite as a front, and, just black power to the people, But now I feel like that's not going to get it. I think we need, like I said, this call of action where everyone needs to be involved, because we can stand even stronger and make a bigger impact if we have other people of other colors who also agree that this is an injustice that's happening.
Change is difficult for me. Like I said, I am, a reader of history. And so you see people, even like, I keep mentioning MLK because I'm doing research on him right now, but you see even him towards the end of his life just lose trust and faith in white people. You've seen over and over countless times throughout history when times get really tough. So for example, SNCC turned into an all-black organization towards the end of SNCC being an organization, and white people cut all the money. White people were pissed that they became an all-black organization. But, kind of like you, I think that, Stokely Carmichael, who's one of the framers of Black Power, has this, when he's talking about Black Power, he says that black people need to close ranks before black people can enter an open society. Mm-hmm. Black people need to get our stuff together before we can enter into the open society. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of my line of thinking. I fully think that black people and brown people can liberate ourselves, that we don't need white people to liberate ourselves. However, there's parallel movements that can happen here, right? White people have plenty of work to do in the white communities. We have people like Donald Trump in the world and their supporters. So what's crazy about Donald Trump is not him, but it's the supporters, right? It's the people backing him and the people that are being silent about, the stuff that he's saying, the dangerous rhetoric he's saying. So I think, first that, black people, we need to, close ranks Black people need to close ranks, but there also needs to be a parallel movement as well too, of white people combating white supremacy. And we're starting to see that as well too. So if you look in Nashville, there's BLM's a Black and people of color only organization, but you also have groups like Surge, who are doing work in white communities, things like that as well too. So for me, that's my model right now. I don't know, how long it's going to last, and hope we get space to evolve and change and things like that. So
Yeah, I hope that happens. And for our listeners, Joshua just mentioned Surge. It's Showing Up for Racial Justice. They have a Nashville chapter. They are devoted to organizing white communities to stand up and talk against racial injustice as they see it. And so thank you guys so much for being here and talking about this issue. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. And should you be so inclined, send us emails, send us comments, let us know what you think needs to happen, what is happening, and all of the above. So thank you all again. April Jones, Jermaine Soto, and Joshua Crutchfield, we appreciate you being here. I'm Molly Blankenship.
I'm Mallory Burns.
And this is the Reclaim Podcast. Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
it's good.
Yeah, often fit.